and all these things which I have no idea what they are, but she's like my go-to person for those kind of discussions. So she's always happy to help and has been a friend to the VMUG community. So Julie.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, I'm Julie Starr. Very happy to be here today. And when Ariel mentioned that there was a 10-minute talk, a slot available, I thought to myself, well, I can talk for hours and days. I used to teach at a university, so that comes very naturally. So I tried to pick a very narrow topic. So today I wanted to talk about policy security groups, which is a component in Service Composer. But I really need to get a sense from the audience, like, where you guys are at. So first off, how many folks are running NSX? Like many?
At least installed it.
At least installed it, great. So we have like a couple, like a small percentage. How many folks like VCNS? Anyone have run VCNS? Not too many? Okay, so what I want to talk about today, it's a very specific topic because we have a short amount of time. But the reason this came to mind for me to talk about was because I've been watching Service Composer. Service Composer is a part of NSX and how you manage some of the security functions. So that's the kind of, to give you the context, you've got NSX installed, you can use it for network virtualization, you can use it for a lot of security services. Well, how do you manage some of those security services? And that's where Service Composer comes into play. So if you go and you look through VMworld presentations, you'll see, I think there was a presentation in 2013 on Service Composer, and that is where you start seeing, 2013 is where you'll see mentions of Service Composer, and it's something to do with how you manage stuff, okay? The thing I find hilarious is that there is one key component that you must understand, and no one ever pointed this out when I got training. And I just found it just hilarious because y'all sit there and you're like, oh, I'll be so quiet. You're like, oh no, I'll like absorb the info. It's hard to tell if you're really understanding stuff or you're just blanking out. And so that's what I kind of noticed watching a lot of these presentations. I would look at internal presentations of people watching. We're going to watch 40 minutes on Service Composer, and no one asks any questions because no one, it's like, you guys, it's a lot of men in this room. It's like, I notice just like a tendency not to want to like, oh, what the heck are you talking about, right? Whoever wants to be that person. And so what I noticed was, and this dawned on me, a couple weeks ago, was that if I were to teach Service Composer, the first thing I would probably kind of want to do is tell you, why you even care about this small part of the product, what you use it for, and by the way, if you start configuring it, here's one key component where if you have no idea what I'm talking about, when I say policy security group, if that doesn't go ding, 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 I know you haven't actually run it and used it in production or anything. And that's why the funny thing is, I'm pretty sure very few people do. This is actually like an internal test that I just like waving at the camera because this is going to be online. This is almost like an internal test I give to folks. And if I say policy security group and you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I've seen people teach Service Composer and not really hone in on this. So really my point here is to just explain to you a key concept. It's very simple to give you an idea. But part of my issue is just that I find it hilarious how we train folks because I just like being a bit more interactive. So I know this might not be as relevant for you guys because you're not running NSX yet, but if you go and you look through some of those VMworld presentations and whatnot, they kind of, a lot of them just kind of skip over like, what the heck is this? So what is Service Composer? So Service Composer, it's a part, as I mentioned, part of NSX. You go into vCenter once NSX is installed, you're going to see in the network and security section, you're going to see a whole bunch of little options that show up on the left-hand side. One of those is going to be Service Composer. So it is required. The only one it's really required for, just ignore all the marketing, the only one you absolutely must a bunch of hosts, Windows hosts on the same workloads in the same host, and they all start kicking off AV scans at the same time, you're going to have a little bit of competition for those resources. So one way we can manage that is to go and get a partner like Trend Micro is one where they have a solution, and you're really kind of on the host, so almost like one instance of AV scanning to cover all of the AV scanning. Well, the way you manage that in NSX is with Service Composer. It is required. So that's why if you're going to do agentless AV scanning, you're going to run Service Composer and you're going to have to configure this, and you will run across the question of what the heck is this policy security group? Now, if you look through the marketing, they will try to tell you that there's all other kind of reasons you would use Service Composer, but I'm here to tell you there's two options for managing a lot of things, but the only one that's absolutely required is if you're doing guest introspection. You're doing things in the operating system level, security services like AV scanning. So it also turns out that you can do things like generate firewall rules. You might have heard maybe about our distributed firewall capabilities in NSX. We also have, you'll see on the floor today at the conference, there was a lot of vendors like Checkpoint and a few others. They have an integration with NSX, which takes advantage of network introspection. And that's where we can kind of start shunting packets off to them. That's great. You have an option to manage that policy either in this one part where it's basically called firewall or in Service Composer. So it's not required, but it's an option out there. Another one is if you want to make security groups, because who wants to just like have, a lot of times you want to group things together and apply policy. Let's say you want to have like all the web servers and all the database servers, you want to have a firewall rule instead of like typing in IP addresses or something like that. So if you want to make security groups and that's it, you would do it in this interface. So I just took a screenshot to kind of give you an idea. Hopefully, I don't know if that shows up very well, but the idea is on the left-hand side, you've got the NSX, and what's highlighted is where it says Service Composer. So when you're logging into the hands-on lab, you can go poke around and start breaking things. That's all I'm really referring to is this new component. The reason I talk about this is because everyone's used to how a firewall rule base works. Usually first match wins, you have a source, a dest, an IP address. Everyone knows that. But we're talking about being able to do firewall and other rules, and we're just giving you a completely different way of doing that, and a lot of folks, it just kind of goes right over their heads. So the thing that's a little crazy, though, is, and so one other thing is, I want to see, so also notice across the top, it says, in the main screen there, it says Service Composer. It says Security Groups. That's where you would make collections of groups, and you can nest security groups, yay. Security policies, that's where you could have, maybe you have a policy for like all your database servers or whatever. And the last one, it says Canvas. That's just a graphical representation of like what your policies look like. So to do Service Composer, you have to make security policies. What is a security policy? It is just a collection of actions to take on a virtual machine. So if I want to do AV scanning, I make a security group. Maybe I shove all of the desktops, in a Horizon View or something into that security group, and I say, take that security group and apply the agentless AV scanning. Great. So this is just the interface for doing that. If I want to have a rule for my, a firewall rule or send traffic to send to Palo Alto Networks, great. I make a security group and attach it to a policy. Now the crazy thing is, if you actually went and tried to make a security policy, you've got 5, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the side. It says, hey, would you like this collection of traffic that these VMs and VNICs you've identified? Would you like to do guest introspection services? That's like the AV. Would you like to make firewall rules, like the distributed firewall? Would you like to send traffic to something like Palo Alto Networks or Checkpoint? We're just giving you a simple interface to do that. But the thing to know is, under firewall, it says, either source or destination selection or both must be policy security groups. Current selection will apply to outgoing traffic from the security group where that policy gets applied to specific destination. And you'll notice under source it says policy security group. Isn't that like, does that anyone else, like what the heck is it talking about? Does that seem weird? It's like, why can't I just say my web security group? Why do I have to have this thing that says policy, like very specifically just policy security group? So that's why this is a little weird. There's some kind of indirection going on. It's very specific. You cannot make a firewall rule here unless you pick one as either your source or your dest or both. So it turns out that if you don't catch on to this, that it's very specifically called policy security groups, you've kind of missed a whole bunch of what Service Composer does. So where you actually go and attach that is when you make a security policy with all these different functions, You actually have to go in afterward, after you've made a security policy, you just kind of right click or hit on action, just say, attach some security groups that you've made, and then you're fine. That's your policy security group. So really, that's really what I wanted to bring to you guys today. It's a very simple concept, but I swear, if you want to have fun, someone says, yeah, I install NSX and I run stuff, it's like, just ask them if they even know what those 3 words mean and refer to. It's a very specific concept. So that's really all I had for you today. But I guess, did you guys have any questions?
You mentioned that's a neat little thing. Is this something that's overlooked or missing in the documentation? Is this a real hair puller?
The funny thing is that I was actually at a meeting with a bunch of SEs in this one region, and I was supposed to give an hour-long talk on Service Composer, and I just started off talking about this. 90% of the folks in the room had no idea what I was talking about, and as we spent an hour and a half talking about the function, and someone was sitting there going through the manual and like, oh, it actually says a lot of the stuff right here. I think the issue is that the information was all there, but not everyone was absorbing it and really understanding it. And so I like to just bring this topic up because it kind of shows if you just get your head around this, it gets you started, because then when you read the manual, you start picking up a lot more. This really comes into play when you start deploying or if you're working in a hands-on lab. But I cannot tell you how many folks, it's like it just totally blanks when you see that little notice that pops up in the GUI.
And then eventually the light goes on and everything makes sense.
Yeah, but that's what I'm hoping. But I actually saw this one internal video where it was like a 45-minute presentation on all the new stuff in Service Composer, and someone was like, "Hey, I have a question about," it's like you could kind of tell like there was something missing, and the presenter was like, "We have 40 slides to get through, so we'll take questions." And I just thought that's you can talk for 40 minutes, but how much was actually absorbed by your audience? And so that's why I'm always a fan of being interactive and not just like throwing stuff, at you guys. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I generally like to refer to it as a variable, because that's essentially what it comes down to when you start applying the rules.
Yeah.
Based on whatever your target groups or whatever. So, yeah, I reference it as PSG because that's what it is.
Yeah.
But to my team, just think of it as just a variable.
Yeah, but if you don't point it out, so you've obviously worked with it. Yeah, and what I thought was funny is because there's a thing where I had someone who mentioned, well, I wish I could have multiple security groups attached to the policy, but I wanted to have the source and desk to be like one policy security group to the other policy security group, and you can't do that on it. It's you can nest things together, but it's kind of specific in that. But any other questions? Yep.
Can you use tags on VMs to apply the policies?
Yeah. So you would make when you're making the security group, you could have it dynamic, and you could use the you could make a bunch of. There's all kinds of criteria that you can identify. A lot of them it's like VM names. If you have, if you want to put tags on them and say, hey, if you have this tag, then you're in this group. But that's one of the beauties of the security groups with security services is in NSX is that, like with firewall rules, any other firewall, you have to sit there and type in an IP address and put it in the object and put it in the group and all this stuff. We're smart enough where the magic of VM tools, we can get that IP address and you can focus on, actually the policy instead of writing policy just based on networking concepts. But, yep.
VMs could be in multiple security groups?
Yes. And the other trick, though, is if you're looking at firewall rules, it is going to be first match wins. You can do weighting in security with your security policies. So the other thing is anything that you create in Service Composer, if it results in partner into a Palo Alto redirection rule or a firewall rule, you will see it show up in the firewall first match wins rule base, and you'll kind of get to be able to double check on is your weighting correct? Do you need to adjust that? Anyone?
Is there any plans to allow the solution to connect into Active Directory to look at OUs or computer groups to be able to just have those groups transfer over? Yeah, I'm not aware that the integration we have with Active Directory right now is based on the user identification and
Most of the stuff is inside of vCenter Architects, right?
You do what?
Most of the settings would be inside of vCenter.
Yeah, but that is a very good question on just integrating in, and I will bring that back next week. I go back to Palo Alto, so definitely. Anyone else? Well, I think that's my time, so thank you.